Welcome to Let's Talk Para, the podcast where we talk about all things para sport. I'm Yasmina Isa, a para badminton player, and I'm thrilled to bring you inspiring stories from athletes, coaches, researchers, and everyone shaping the para sport movement. If you're passionate about para sport or just hearing about it now, join me each episode as we delve into the world of para sport. Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Para. Joining me today as a co-host is Jess Down. Jess is a sports psychology student at Loughborough University, and our guest for this episode is Ahalya Lettenberger. Ahalya comes all the way from Chicago. She's a Paralympic medalist in para swimming and a Rice alumni. She studied bioengineering in her undergrad and is currently doing a master's in sports biomechanics at Loughborough University. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So, Ahalya, coming all the way from the US, that must have been very different. How's it been in the UK?
Yeah, it's been good so far. Obviously, it was a transition. I've only been here like 2 months now, but I've really enjoyed it so far. Loughborough is like a really small town, but I've enjoyed like the community and just, yeah, kind of exploring the country.
Definitely smaller than Chicago.
Yeah, I know, it's tiny.
So could you tell us a bit about your childhood and growing up and how you got into para swimming, really?
Yeah, for sure. I was born with a disability called Arthrogryposis, amyoplasia. So basically, it's a musculoskeletal disorder that affects me from the waist down. So it causes like muscle weakness and joint restrictions in my legs. So growing up, I think it was like hard growing up with a physical, like visible disability in the U.S. just because I think there's a little bit of like stigma and stereotypes surrounding it. So I think like when I was really young, I kind of tried to like hide my disability a little bit, just tried to pretend like I was like quote unquote normal, even though now I know that's not a thing. But yeah, I grew up like playing soccer and softball, but obviously for someone who can't walk very well, let alone run, those aren't exactly the best sports to be playing. So eventually, like, as the kids got faster and the fields got bigger, my parents were kind of like, okay, we think you should maybe stop doing this, maybe find something else to be passionate about. And that's kind of when I discovered swimming, and swimming just, I immediately fell in love with it, just like the freedom of the water. Yeah, not having like the limitations that I do on land, I think.
Like when you're in the water, you're just, you're basically...
I mean, the soccer is impressive.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
I also I think a lot of guests spoke about this before, the whole idea of when you're a child, you don't feel the difference as much.
Yeah, that's true.
But when you get older, that's when you're like, maybe it is getting harder.
Yeah, to notice it.
Exactly. So then you want to get into para sport, and that's I think the role of para sport.
Yeah.
What age did you start para swimming then?
Yeah, I started swimming just like for a club team in my town when I was 10, and then I didn't find out about para swimming until maybe like 2 years later. So when I was like 12 years old, but para swimming like really just transformed my life and like my attitude towards my disability. And again, like you just said, like that's kind of the role of parasport. I feel like it gives you such a community of like other people who've gone through such unique and like similar experiences to you. So I feel like after I went to my first like para swimming meet, it just completely changed my outlook on my disability, and I realized it wasn't something that I should try to hide, but it's something that I should embrace.
No, definitely. And did you have a lot of like disabled athletes or people around you growing up, or was it like all you saw non-disabled athletes around you?
Yeah, I feel like the athletes around me were mostly non-disabled. Like there wasn't a huge parasport community like in my town or city. My younger brother was born with the same disability as me, so that was nice growing up together and being able to share those experiences together, and me being able to like kind of help him out as his older sister. But yeah, I feel like in regards to sport, like finding that parasport community like kind of nationally in the US was just such a huge experience for me.
So, how did you qualify for Tokyo then? Like, because obviously you said you found out about para swimming when you were 11 years old?
Yeah, 12.
12, 11, 12?
Yeah.
So, how did you go from playing at, club level to winning a Paralympic medal?
Gosh, it was a journey, that's for sure. I think it took a lot of time and practice, and I went to I qualified for my first international meet when I was pretty young, when actually I was like 13. It was like the next year after I found paraswimming, so in 2014. And then I won like my first international medal in 2015 when I was 14 at the Pan American Games. And so I don't know, I think it was just kind of like a stepping stone pathway. Like I ended up qualifying like for my first World Championships in 2019. So that would have been the year before Tokyo, but obviously COVID postponed it for a year. So yeah, I think I just kind of like worked my way up different levels of meets, like different international meets, and then like we have trials similar to how you guys do in the UK. Like we have trials to qualify for games. So yeah, it's like all based on times and world rankings, and it's kind of complicated, but
yeah. So you qualified for Tokyo.
Yeah.
Went on to win a medal. Did that 1 year benefit you? Because obviously Tokyo was postponed a year. Did that 1 year benefit you in terms of like extra training, or do you feel like you would have wanted it 2020? Obviously that was COVID, but had COVID not happened?
That's such a good question. I mean, I think it's so hard to say for me personally, just because I did end up doing like really well in Tokyo. So it's hard to say if I would have done even better the year before. Like obviously everybody kind of had to do this, but like take time off of swimming like the summer of COVID because all the pools were shut and it was just insane. But I feel like the extra year probably did end up benefiting me, just giving me an extra year, because I had gone to university in the U.S. in 2019. So if Tokyo had been in 2020, it would have only been a year like in a new training environment. So I think that second year kind of helped me adjust a little more to like the new training environment, the new living environment.
Kind of got used to it first before you went straight into the game.
Yeah.
So touching a bit about going back to growing up in school and stuff, was your school able to accommodate? Was it accessible, and were they able to do that? Because I think it's really hit and miss with a lot of people. Some schools really do it well, others there's still a lot to be done.
I think I was pretty fortunate growing up that like my schools were very accommodating for both me and my younger brother. Like they always offered support. It was pretty accessible in terms of like sport. I think like sports are kind of like by state, like in the U.S. in terms of like high school sport.
Okay, yeah.
So Illinois had just, right before I got to high school, like they had just implemented like a new thing that like para swimmers and para like track and field, like they could compete at the state level for their schools. And that was because of a girl who like really advocated for that. So that was really nice to be able to kind of represent my high school program and like swim with my friends on that team, like, and go to like state championships and stuff. So yeah, I think I was really fortunate like with how inclusive it was growing up.
Yeah, that's really nice, because I think like you say, that's not always, I know like in my school I was the only one in a wheelchair, and you kind of feel like the outsider and stuff. So when you can have that really nice environment, it kind of helps with later on. And
I think I had like a really good friend group. Like
it makes a difference.
Yeah, I had like the same friends in elementary school.
Is everything.
Yeah, exactly. They just like knew what I needed and like never questioned it. I don't know. Yeah, I think I just had a really supportive community.
Yeah, which is amazing.
I think with the supportive community as well, what you want from them sometimes is to not treat you differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, you are aware you are different, but at the same time, you don't want to be treated different.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
Because just you were in a wheelchair for a few years.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were treated differently, or did your friends like not treat you differently?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd grown up in school kind of not in a wheelchair, and then all of a sudden in sixth form, I was in a wheelchair. I wasn't able to walk. And I think I did really struggle with that support network in school. I was the only one, kind of, it was all very new. I think I was very much seen as the girl in the wheelchair. I wasn't seen as Jess.
Yeah.
I was seen as the girl in the wheelchair. And, like, I would have loved them to just be like, there's Jess. But it's like, there's the girl in the wheelchair, or she's in the wheelchair, or... Yeah, I think I definitely did feel quite out of place. And, I mean, like, some of my teachers were incredible and so supportive, but it was a pretty hard experience of just being the outsider, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to talk about people, like, to talk with people who either, like, grew up with their disability or, like, acquired their disability, because I do feel like those are also, like, different experiences.
Yeah.
Like, because for you, like, people knew you before you were in the wheelchair, and then I feel like when something, like, when you acquire your disability, it's almost viewed in, like, a negative way, like, oh, now she's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Like, versus... First of all, like, it shouldn't be viewed like that.
Yeah.
It's not a negative thing, which
But
is something that we're
like
trying
that.
to change.
Yeah.
But, like, it is viewed like that versus, like, for me, like, being born with it, like, that's all people ever knew. So, like, it was never like, the girl in the wheelchair was always just Ahalya because they grew up with me, like, in my town.
Yeah.
But also, like, when I went to university, like, I feel like once you move communities too, it's also, like, it's all definitely was in the back of my mind, like, oh, now I have to make new friends. Like, are people going to want to be friends with me? Like, the girl in the wheelchair. Like, and you kind of have to establish who you are again.
Yeah, you worry about it. And I know when I introduced myself to people at uni, I was like, do I bring up that I'm disabled, or do I mention it? How do I go about it?
So true.
And, I mean, for me, coming to Loughborough, it was the best thing, community and support-wise. My friends here are phenomenal. They just saw me as Jess, and I think... You get older and it is that university feel, and Loughborough is amazing for being inclusive.
Yeah.
But coming here, I was like, okay, now I found my support network.
I found my people.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you touched on something that was quite interesting, because it is very different when you're born with a disability and when you acquire it later in life. Because when you acquire it later in life, not only do you worry about people's reactions, but there's also what you go through, because it's that shift in mindset of I'm now this, not saying it's a bad thing, but it's more of like I am now disabled, you know, and especially when you acquire it later on, whereas when you're born with it, you're like, you know, this is my life. So really quick, Jess, did you know much about parasport or disabilities before you got into a wheelchair?
So I used to coach disability gymnastics on a Saturday, but that was kind of the only... I wasn't really that knowledgeable about it. I guess now I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't you really think about it before? But until you are in that situation, like, it's not always at the forefront of your mind. So I wasn't that knowledgeable about parasport. I obviously knew about the Paralympics and everything, but I was never that knowledgeable about it. And then, yeah, like you said, it's that weird of almost not your identity changes, but... For ages, I was in denial. Yeah. I was like, I'm not disabled. That's not who I am. Like, sure, like, I'd lived this life so normally, so active, and being able to do gymnastics, and all of a sudden, I'm disabled in a wheelchair, paralysed, and I'm like, hang on a minute, this is not me. So I think, it was a really weird adjustment, and for ages, I was in denial, and kind of like, I know a lot of people do sometimes struggle with, like, I'm not disabled, that's not who I am. Yeah. But yeah, I think coming to Loughborough, like, my friends that I have now, they just saw me as me. Yeah. Which is amazing. Yeah. Like, one of my closest friends, Laura, was like, but you're just Jess. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, exactly. Yeah.
No, I think as you get older as well, it's kind of, the education around it in some areas has gotten a lot better. Yeah. So you are treated not different, you know, and I think that's what you need, really. Yeah. So touching on that, you know, we touched a bit on Loughborough University, where we're all studying. But obviously you came here for a master's. Yeah. So you were studying in the US. Completely different. Well, I'd say the US and the UK are completely
I'd say they're pretty different.
Yeah, I would say they're very different.
Yeah. So could you tell us a bit about how the institutions, you could be specific to Rice and Loughborough, but like institutions in general, how they're different in terms of parasport in the US and the UK, really.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. So in the U.S., like the collegiate sports system is like called the NCAA.
Yeah.
And within the NCAA, there really is no like para sport support right now, or like even really even acknowledgement of it. Like, first of all, it's really hard to be able to go swim for a team. Like, I remember when I was in high school and trying to get recruited, or like I sent so many emails to college coaches, and I would say maybe a third of them even responded back to me. And this was me. I wasn't a Paralympian yet, but I was like
borderline a Paralympian.
I was going to world championships, like at the top of my sport, you know.
Yeah.
And like to have so few schools like even respond it's just kind of sad.
Yeah.
But then you just can't, like, NCAA's is like nationals for college sports, and there's no like parasport division there, so you can't like really compete and score points for your school. I was really fortunate at Rice to have like such a supportive coach and such a supportive team, who like really wanted to be on me to be on the team, and like I could compete at like dual meets and like conference championships and things like that. But obviously I was like the slowest one because I can't use my legs, so like I never scored points, but I was able to be included in that. So that was like, it was like really the best experience ever. And then you come here. One of the biggest reasons I wanted to come to Loughborough is because of like the parasport community that exists here. Oh, also I was like the only para athlete at Rice,
Right.
like across all sports. But then here at Loughborough, like there's such a big parasport community. Like you walk around campus and you're bound to like see a para athlete.
Yeah.
And then like within Bucks, you know, like para athletes can score points. So that's why like Loughborough like wants para athletes, because we can score and we can represent the university. So that's really cool. I actually have Bucks for swimming this week, and I'm super excited.
That's
to like
really
be able to go and like hopefully score points and just like be a part of that team. It's very different.
So this is your first time basically scoring points for your university, really.
Wow.
So obviously it's nice when you're integrated, like in America you were integrated, but at the same time you're like, a part of you is always like, no, I want to contribute to that, you know?
Yeah, it's like there's pros and cons. Like obviously I think the NCAA needs to like be more inclusive of para athletes and para swimmers, because that's ultimately how we'll grow the sport. I do think there's like pros and cons to the structure of like para sport at university here. I think because there's no para sport like separation at the university level in the States, I was just a swimmer on my team. Like nobody really thought of me as a para swimmer, versus here, like because there's a separate like para swimming coach, I think people view me more as like a para swimmer.
Right.
Which is not a bad thing at all. It's just different. So it's interesting to like compare those.
Yeah.
No, I know what you mean on that, because when you, like back home for me, I was just a badminton player, but coming here, I'm a para when someone asks me what's your sport, I'll say para badminton, but in the past I just say badminton. And I think the difference is here, they do that because they're like, we have this offer, whereas back home you were just integrated into a non-disabled practice, you know. And I think that's do you think you prefer to be called do you prefer to be called a swimmer or a para swimmer? Do you like that designation? Or
I'm super proud to like be a Paralympian and be like a para swimmer. I think it depends on like the context of it. Like obviously I am just a swimmer in some aspects, but also I'm not ashamed to like be called a para swimmer. So it's hard because you don't want it to be viewed as like, let's say like lesser or like different completely. But I also like want to be I want to be like a para swimmer. So I don't know what I prefer. I think it really depends on the context. I think they both have their perks.
Because one of them, you know, you're different and you get treated a certain way. You're competing. You're at the top of your sport. Whereas the other one, you're treated like every. So it is really a matter of, and I think it's personal preference really,
for sure.
For people. But in terms of like training environments, where you, because of the whole para swimmer, US, UK, are you, like, did they integrate you into sessions, or did you have like your own separate sessions when you were training?
Yeah, in the US, I was integrated completely. Like, I really never had my own sessions. We would just like modify practices, like for swimming, like kick sets. Like, I can't kick, so I would like pull or modify like intervals, things like that, so that I could be like fully integrated like every practice. And I think that's something that, like, I think I came in with to here like with the mindset like, oh, like it'll be similar. And I think like the first couple of weeks I just kept comparing it to my experience instead of coming in with the mindset of like, this is going to be completely different. So I've kind of shifted my mindset because I think like the structure here is different. Like, I'm integrated in some practices, but I also like have my own practices a couple days a week. Like, just saw me at the pool yesterday, and that was kind of like my own practice. And there's definitely pros and cons to both. Like, I really enjoy being doing the integrated practices because like I'm just a social person, so
you get to talk to everyone.
Yeah, that's like one of the best parts about sport is like
the social
side of it. But then like when I do my practices on my own, it gives us a lot more freedom to like do things specific to me. So yeah, it's different, but I've enjoyed it so far.
Yeah, and I think also when you get your own training, kind of personalized to you, really. Cause,
yeah, for sure.
I know for me, it's like I'll have some things that they'll tell me that not only I could do, but only I should be doing, because that's what's going to work for me. And I'm assuming it's the same for you in swimming.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, I think sometimes having that separation is quite important.
Yeah.
So moving on a bit to the Paralympics.
Yeah.
You know, Paralympic medalist. So let's talk about Paris.
Yeah.
So could you tell us what happened in Paris? Obviously, you medaled in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Fortunately, you got no medals in Paris.
Yeah.
But you got 4th place. Still a
amazing.
remarkable.
Yeah.
No, I didn't mean it like still a remarkable achievement.
5th place. Yeah.
5th place. But still a remarkable achievement.
Yeah.
Like you're competing at the highest level.
Yeah,
you're at the Paralympics. That's incredible.
Just getting there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a massive thing.
Exactly. So yeah, could you what was the preparation like for Paris and just the experience really? Because obviously Tokyo, you had COVID, so I'm gonna assume the Paralympic Village experience was completely different.
Yeah.
So what was Paris like?
The actual games experience was really incredible. Like, yeah, I don't think I realized how like different Tokyo was because I'd never been to a games before, so for me like that will always have a special place in my heart because it was my first one, and it was so incredible because it was my first one. But then going to Paris, like having people in the stands, having my family there, like being able to the atmosphere of the whole city, like I was like, oh, this is what Paralympics is actually supposed to be like. It was just so cool to actually be able to like explore the city of Paris too when I was done competing. Just all of it was super cool. I think Paris did a really good job. Like every swimming session was completely sold out. The arena was just completely full. So I think they did a great job.
Is para swimming, like at your internationals or your world champs, do you guys get big crowds? So the Paralympics was
Paralympics, by far the biggest crowd I've swum in front of. Yeah.
Do you hear the crowd while you're swimming?
I feel like not while you're actually swimming your race, but like obviously beforehand when you walk out, you do.
Wait, what's your stroke?
I do freestyle and then IM, which is all the strokes. So
yeah. I don't even know if that's the right way to ask it. What's your stroke?
No, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, that is right. Okay, yeah, I was just double checking. But no, I think in breaststroke though, you could kind of hear the crowd.
That is true. I did some 100 breaths and I felt like I could hear them when I came up. That's probably the only stroke that you can hear them.
My brother's actually a swimmer, so I remember every time he went out to like take a breath in breaststroke, my dad would say something like, okay, I don't even know what he said, but something like, beep, whatever it was. So he'd hear him every time he goes up to like push harder. But yeah,
that's so funny.
But I know you could hear it in breaststroke, but I'm assuming the other ones you're too busy going up and down.
And you're in that mindset, like you block everyone out.
Yeah.
So in IM, what is your like how long? How far?
Oh yeah. So
How far?
so my best events are 400 freestyle and then 200 IM.
Okay, so
Those are meters, yeah.
Yeah, is that like that? Would that be considered long course?
Well, yeah. So like the Paralympics, all international meets are like long course,
Okay.
and then like right now we're in short course season, so that's like 25 meters. But those are like the longest events in Paris swimming. So like if there was like a mile in Paris swimming, that would be my event. But unfortunately, the longest event is the 400. So that's what I do.
So you like the long distance?
I do. I love
Okay.
long distance, yeah.
So you're not like a sprint. You wouldn't say you're a
No,
sprinter.
I wish I was a sprinter, but I'm not.
Fair enough. But yeah, so Paris.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, obviously the Paralympic village experience was very
Yeah.
different. Now for the actual competition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how was it?
Yeah, I think it's hard to talk about Paris without also talking about Tokyo, because I feel like a lot of my racing, like it all kind of links together. But yeah, I wasn't super happy with how I raced like in Paris. Like obviously you, especially having medaled before, you kind of go in like obviously like wanting to medal again.
Yeah,
like that's the
of
ultimate
course.
goal. So I think the hardest part was I felt like I didn't swim to what I was capable of. Like I had swum faster that year, and I just felt like if I had put together like everything like perfectly, like I could have medaled. So I think that was hard, but also I did all that I could do. So like reflecting back on it now, of course I reflect back on it like a lot more positively than I did in the moment. And now I'm like, okay, like I really did the best I could do. And I mean, 5th place, it's not too bad, you know?
No, definitely not.
Not.
And ultimately, like, it's not, like, a lot of it is about the performance, but I don't know. For me, like, the Paralympics is about so much more than that, you know?
Yeah.
So, while I was disappointed, I also, coming away with that experience and being able to kind of, like, show the world the power of disability, like, that's, I feel like, what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think a lot of my performance, like, stemmed from just, like, I think, like, the mental health side of swimming. Like, to me, I think the mental side of swimming is, like, 90% of it, and the physical part is, like, 10% of it.
Yeah.
And since Tokyo, like, I think I just felt a lot of pressure to kind of repeat that success. I think I went into Tokyo kind of, you know, as a rookie, like, not really having any expectations, and that really helped me kind of just go in free, and, like, I ended up medaling, and that was just crazy, blew away all my expectations. And then coming off of that, kind of grappling with these new pressures, like these new expectations, like what are my goals coming off of that. And I think I worked on that a lot in between Tokyo and Paris, but I think it still kind of affected me, like, going into Paris. Just the pressure, I think, was the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think people don't realise the role that the mind has. Like, yes, all the training, you can practice as many times as you want, but you need to train your mind. You need to get in that mindset. You need to find routines that work for you. And at the end of the day, like, your end competition is just one race. Yeah. And it's all on that moment. Yeah. And you really need to get in the right mindset. And it really can be kind of make or break with how your mind... It could be the best swimming year that you've had, but if your mind's not in it, it is just one of them things.
Exactly.
And it has such a big impact.
Because the thing with swimming as well, you get one race.
Yeah.
And you're like...
And that's
so how long is, like, an average race in swimming? So, like, your race, one of your races?
Like, the 400's, like, 5 minutes, but that's, like, the longest. Yeah. And then the 2 IM is, like, 3 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so that's 3 minutes of... If you're...
everything comes down to that.
Everything comes down to that.
Yeah.
You could have prepared for a year, because physically you're not...
Nothing's really going to change physically.
Yeah, but if your brain's not in, like, if you mentally are not in that moment, you're not going to perform.
And people don't realise how important that is.
For sure.
Like, practicing a bit of a routine, like getting yourself in that mindset, because one small thing can just throw it off.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how you said going into Tokyo, because you weren't, like, you didn't have anything in the past, it was your first one. Kind of, there's less pressure, there's less anxiety, there's less to build up in your mind. Whereas going into Paris, you build it up in your mind. You kind of get yourself in this, like, oh my gosh, this is such a big thing.
Exactly.
Do you think, like, with Paris, part of it was because Tokyo, you had no expectation, so you went in, going like, I've made it.
Yeah.
This is, this is as
just being
good.
there.
This is as good.
Yeah.
This is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna swim my best.
Yeah.
But with Paris, do you think you constantly had that? Oh, I was a medalist, so I need to, either upgrade my medal, or was it a bronze? Silver medal. Yeah. So I need to upgrade my silver or maintain my silver. Yeah. Was that like your mindset going into Paris?
I feel like it was. Like I tried to work on it so much, like to shift that, but at the end of the day, it's hard to shake like those pressures and expectations for yourself. So yeah, I do think that was like always like in the back of my mind, like I did it before, like I have to do it again, like kind of like that I need, like as soon as you have like an I need to or I have to in your head, like before a competition, I feel like that's like not the right mindset to be in. Yeah, I think at Tokyo, like my mindset was really, oh my gosh, this is my first one, like who knows if I'll make another one, like let's just go and have fun and really take in the experience. It's my first one, and yeah, like that was the right mindset to be in. And I tried to be in that mindset for Paris. Like I was like, well, this is my first like normal games, like my first time with my family there. But at the end of the day, subconsciously, like those pressures and expectations are definitely still there.
Yeah, definitely. It was like the need to achieve, like in sports psychology, like we learn about it. It's such a big thing. Yeah. And it's so interesting that you bring it up, and actually, it did impact, like you feel like it did impact your performance.
Yeah. But I think either way, there's still so much to take away from a Paralympic game.
Yeah,
for
sure. Yeah, like, it's amazing.
Paris as well, I think a lot of people said it was
a big, it felt like a really big one. Yeah, really like a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you feel like the Paris atmosphere was quite like, like this feels like the biggest event in your sport?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it was insane. Like I said, like it was completely sold out. Like every single session, whether it was in the morning prelims or the night finals, the atmosphere was just insane. Yeah. Like that for me was like the coolest part of the experience.
And I think the French crowd as well.
Yeah,
they do it.
Oh my gosh, every time there was a French athlete, like you couldn't even hear your own thoughts. It was so cool.
Yeah, no, I'm sure the French, because I know not just in para swimming, but in all the other sports, they did it
really well.
Yeah.
So obviously the Paralympics are in LA next. Yeah. So home games for you.
Yeah, home games.
What do you think like America needs to do in that time to prepare? Because obviously Paris was like a very big step in the right direction. I heard people compare Paris to London.